Meeting is the 1st of August it's our regular town council meeting to order. It is 3 p.m. and Eddie, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Reeves.
Here.
Councilmember McKee-Kent.
Here.
Councilmember Tripp. Here. Vice Mayor Knight.
Here.
Mayor Moeller.
Here. And if we could all stand, if you're able, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Now we need to adopt today's agenda. Do we have a motion and a second?
I move that we adopt today's agenda. Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes unanimously. And item number 4, proclamations. We have no proclamations for recognition today. And now it's time for public comment on anything that is not on today's agenda. So if you could come up to the podium if you have a public comment. I see Josh. Could you introduce yourself?
Hello. Yes, I am Joshua Keyser. I'm the Information Officer 2 at the Veterans Home of California, Yountville. So I just wanted to do a brief public comment to kind of give an update about the home. I'd like to do this, on a fairly regular basis, maybe every month or two, just to let the council know what's happening at the home and the residents of Yountville at large. So I want to thank you all for letting me speak today. I also just want to take a moment to thank everyone in the town of Yountville, its residents, for all the support they provided during our COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, it was an unprecedented time for all of us, and we're extremely proud of what our staff was able to provide and care for our residents, but also what our residents of Yountville were able to provide to the home as well. So for those of you who aren't aware, the home received national recognition for the safety and security we provided in that time, and we owe that to you all as well, so thank you. So as we navigate in this post-COVID-19 era, we just want to let you know that we welcome the town, we welcome its residents. There are just a number of volunteer opportunities and donation opportunities, and so just wanted to give you a little of that information if anyone is interested. Our Volunteer Services Department also oversees donations. So I have an email address. I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I could provide that or a phone number. Can I do that now?
You can provide it to the clerk, and she can provide it to the public.
Now or later? Sorry.
Your choice.
Okay. So it's volunteer at calvet.ca.gov or phone number 707-944-4931. And then I just wanted to mention briefly that we have a fantastic event coming up that was a collaboration with the Yountville Goodwill Coalition. It's called Picnic with a Vet. It's happening tomorrow, actually. And so for those of you who don't know, it's about 15 Yountville residents and 15 home residents. They're getting together up at the home. They're having a picnic. And this is a way to reintroduce folks. A lot of folks haven't seen each other over the last 3 or so years. And so getting reacquainted, we're hoping in this time, folks are sharing phone numbers and emails and rebuilding those relationships and rapport so that the home and the residents of Yountville get back together and we build those connections again. And so with that, lastly, I would just like to, another way to track the home and what we're doing, you can always follow our Facebook page. We update that on a regular basis, just so you have a better feel for what's going on at the home. And like I said, I hope to come and present, every once in a while to keep folks apprised of what's going on up there and build those connections. So thank you very much for me.
Thanks, Josh. Looking forward to seeing more of you in the future then as well. Thanks. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we're going to go to the consent calendar. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Around good 13 number. So first we're going to start, and if the council wants to provide any comments on any of the items Councilmember Reeves?
I would just like to see if the council would be amenable to a small change to the July 18th minutes regarding my report from the Climate Action Committee. It's just a clarification that a $500,000 grant came through Bill Dodd's office from the state budget. From the state budget was not included in there, but I think it helps clarify and make it more accurate.
All right, thank you. Any other council comments? Vice
Mayor,
Mayor?
one comment. Thank you. On the consent calendar, on consent calendar item G is our resolution adopting the contract with Napa County Fire Protection Services. And we are going to have a fire report from the staff that's here today. And so I think I was going to ask to have this item removed, but what I would maybe like to do is that maybe during your presentation, as you're talking to us, you could tell us the opportunities or the what it will change in terms of staffing at the station, and that would be great just for the community to be aware of what advantages our community will have, and I believe for your staff as well as the community that we are really updating. So I'd appreciate that during your report. Thank you.
Any other further discussion before I ask for a motion from the council? Seeing none, can we get a motion and a second for approving the consent items A through M?
I move approval of consent calendar items A through M.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
If I just,
Attorney?
it sounds like you're going to go ahead and say what I was going to say, so go ahead.
Are we going to approve that with the
As
addition
amended.
of that language for?
The friendly amendment is acceptable to the seconder as well?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And now presentations. We have 3 presentations today. The first one is from our representative from Cal Vet, and he will be speaking to us regarding the town recent precautionary boil water notice that I think every resident in town is very familiar with. So please, Josh.
Thank you. Hello again. So I have a statement kind of overlying what, kind of what happened or what's going on, and we'll go from there. So the home was notified in the afternoon of Thursday, July 20, that during normal water testing, water samples provided by Rector Reservoir in the home resulted in a positive E. coli notification. Subsequently, the State Water Resource Control Board, Divisions of Drinking Water, in conjunction with Napa County Health Department and California Veterans Home Water Plant Water System, implemented a boil water notice advising all customers, users, and residents of the Veterans Home to use boiled water. And residents of the Veterans Home to use boiled tap water or bottled water for drinking and cooking purposes as a safety precaution. All parties who receive water from Rector Reservoir, which is 10 main service connections, including the home and the town, were notified of this. The home immediately activated its boiled water protocols, including posting notices on all water sources. Information was provided through closed-circuit television at the home, known as KVET. Information was also provided on digital information boards, via email, and in person. And bottled water was provided to all residents, staff for drinking and hygiene purposes. And then modifications were made also by our food service department. Also, in addition to our administrator, deputy administrator, and members of the staff making additional bottled water trips to Costco and things like that to make sure we were all squared away. We also want to thank Jennifer Brewstar of the Tug McGraw Foundation for securing a donation of bottled water for our staff and residents. And then, so regarding the E. coli notification, for those of you who are unaware, E. coli is a type of coliform. The EPA establishes guidelines for public water systems to regularly test for coliform. Throughout the treatment process, coliform should be removed from the water, but monitoring is regulated to protect the public in case of coliform are found in the water distribution system. All public water systems are required to test regularly and will occasionally have positive samples. The results of these tests are included in our consumer confidence report. There have not been any boiled water notices issued due to a positive E. coli result at the home in over 5 years. Just as an aside there. So our water plant supervisors are not sure whether the test results were accurate. This is due to multiple rounds of resampling resulted in zero indication of coliforms or water quality issues at all. There were also no known events or cross connections that could have resulted in a positive coliform test. We are still looking into the situation while also continuing to sample throughout the system to monitor for coliform and perform all other water testing protocols as required, as we do all the time. It's important to note we had no reports of water-related illness during this boil water period. And at this time, that's all the information we have to provide. So I won't be taking any questions this afternoon.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation and the information to the public. I appreciate you
Absolutely.
coming
Thank you,
down.
Mayor.
All right.
Thanks, Joss.
Bye.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is Napa County CAL FIRE Quarterly Report, and Chief West is here to give us that report. Please come up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Russell West, CAL FIRE Battalion Chief, and your local battalion chief here for the town of Yountville. All right, this is a quarterly report for the section of time between April, May, and June of 2023 of this year. Next slide. Okay, this slide illustrates the call volume itself over the 3-month period, and it's separated between we pie it off between the county, the town, the vet's home, as well as calls into service for Napa City as well. So the left graph will show you the lower left. We ran 109 calls within the county itself, out of Station 12 here. 102 calls were for the town itself, and then 125 calls were for the vet's home. And we ran 15 calls with the city of Napa during that time frame. The upper right graph shows the same quarter the year prior. So the call volume itself has gone up for the town. We ran roughly 10 more calls during the same time frame from this year versus last year. And then the lower right will show you the 5-year average. So we're significantly higher. We're at 102 calls during this time this year versus 84 for the 5-year average. Next slide. So out of those calls we ran for the town of Yountville, this is broken down. It breaks it down even more to show what types of calls we ran and what the percentages is. So it goes with no secret that the majority of the calls we get are medical calls. So 69% of them were medical. The next biggest one was public assist. We ran 16%, and then all the other ones were a bunch smaller. Unfortunately, there was no structure fires here in the town. Next slide. This is to show reference for what the vet's home. In comparison, 93% of the calls for the vet's home were medical calls. I'm sure that's no secret to anybody. And then the next largest call volume is alarm soundings, which was only 5% of the call volume to the vet's home. Next slide. We have a couple sections here that'll show significant events and things that took place that we participated in. This is the town Easter egg hunt, where we had both the engine and the truck participate. they were down there showing off the rigs for the kids and handing out stickers and helmets and checking all the Easter eggs that they located and participating in the community. Next slide. We also had, sadly, a death in the CAL FIRE family. It actually happened here in Napa County, up at the Snell Valley area, up in Berryessa Estates, where one of our captains perished during a motorcycle accident. And during his procession, you can see the truck up there with Napa City's truck on the left. We raised the flag and paid our respect as he passed through for the funeral procession on his way from South Napa up to Lake County. Next slide. We also participated in Lucky Kid. His family won a raffle prize, which included us participating in a birthday here in town, where we showed up at the park and were able to let the kids spray water and check out all the cool fire equipment that we have and play firefighter for the day, as well as the other lucky kids at the park that were just so happened to be there that day as well. Next slide. This is here at the local training grounds where CAL FIRE did a rehire academy, or did multiple rehire academies for its seasonal staff. So our employees came out, and it's right in our backyard, so they came and provided their expertise in extrication for cutting vehicles, as well as vertical ventilation and all the other stuff to bring them up to par and learn new tools of the trade. And this is the last slide. More training that we did on the right. We did aerial operations at the local training grounds as well. And then we threw this one in on the left. It actually wasn't training. This was an emergency that took place up in up valley from here outside of Calistoga, where up in a rural area, a person was utilizing a tractor, ended up rolling it and getting pinned underneath it. So we had to hike into the person. Rescue 12 from here in town brought up specialized equipment to lift the tractor off of the person to free him, to where we could hoist him out by helicopter out to the local hospital. So that's them actually at the scene lifting the tractor off of the pinned person to free him. And that's what I got for the quarterly report for you.
All right, thank you very much. And
We'll just trade off real quick.
there you go, perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the council and Madam Mayor. I'm Mike Marcucci. I'm the Napa County Fire Chief, as well as the CAL FIRE Unit Chief here for the Sonoma Lake Napa Unit. It's a pleasure to be here again to speak to you again regarding the contract with Napa County for fire protection. Just a recap of what you're actually, the council is actually paying for fiscal year 23-24. There's an increase to the staffing at the Yountville station, as we mentioned before at the last time I spoke to you, where each participant, the town, the vet's home, and the county are each paying for one additional member at the fire station this fiscal year, and then an additional one on top of that for a total of 2 at the next fiscal year for 24-25. That'll bring the station from 2 people or 2 personnel per day per vehicle to 3. So in essence, you'll have 6 firefighters on a day at your station versus 4. And what that allows us to do is really expand our ability to provide the service. We've already seen that. As a matter of fact, on the first day, we had a call where we normally would have had to bring both vehicles with us, but because we had the 3rd person on the engine, we weren't needing the truck company to escort a medical aid patient down from the residence to the ambulance. We had all 3 folks there, and it was truly a 3 firefighter mission, if you will, and we would have had to commit both pieces of apparatus, and we've seen that repeatedly as we've moved through. To expand that, the town of Yountville has truly bought into a regional fire concept that we have here in the Napa Valley. There's only 5 fire agencies in Napa County, and no one agency can do it alone, as we have shown over the years. We help each other with pretty much seamless boundaries. Along those lines, when we have to go to the city of Napa, or inversely, when the city of Napa comes to town, they're bringing a truck company with 3 personnel on it. When we would respond, in times we would have to bring both the engine and the truck to provide that equal service back. That time has ended. We can now send Truck 12 down to the city for a response, still maintaining that level of service here in the town with a 3-person engine company for the next type of call. And that theme is going to be repeated over and over again, so I won't belabor the point. But as you'll see, as we have these incidents, and we talked about it before, if we have a medical aid at the vet's home or just on the highway and we break a fire in town, with the battalion chief, that'll be funded as well, 1/3 by the town, we'll be able to make that attack when we have our 2 in, 2 out, our industry standard that OSHA allows us to be able to make those firefights happen. So it's truly an insurance policy that the town is really investing in for your assets at risk here in the town. And so that is the kind of the financial part of it. One of the questions that brought up by Vice Mayor Knight was, what are those folks going to be doing? What are these new firefighters going to be doing? And truly what it's going to allow us to do is really expand out our services to the town as well. You're going to see us in town more. Right now, with 4 people per day, the work really never ends. It allows us more bandwidth, if you will, and I know that's a cliche. But as we're doing out helping with the fire marshal's office, doing inspections in the vet's home, and we're in town performing services and things along those lines, having those extra bodies is just extra hands, and now we're able to do more with more. And so truly that is what we're looking for. Operationally speaking, we have a captain on every day of the week right now. Right now we don't. We didn't have that before July 1st. We don't have a captain. We didn't have a captain there every day. So our line leadership was truly ebbed and flowed, if you will. So now we have a standard across the board. The companies that you'll see them driving through town out to the drill grounds out at Rector Reservoir have had to rewrite all of their manuals as far as what to do with that third person. We've heard stories the first week or so where they'd almost forget there was a third person there. It's been so many years with those two people. So we're absolutely working diligently to redo our standard operating procedures and our guidelines to be able to better affect rescues, better to be able to serve the town during fires and medical aids and such. And really, there's more medical aids than there are fires. But when there is a fire, it could potentially be one of substance here as the age of the town and the closeness of the buildings and such. So the final piece is just to reflect a little bit on cooperative fire protection is what really the town is invested in along with the county as far as cooperative fire protection with CAL FIRE, and we're coming up on our 100th year in 2027 of providing some level of service to this county from CAL FIRE. The folks sitting behind me here with Deputy Chief Jason Martin, Division Chief Brian Hammond, Battalion Chief Russell West are all funded by the county or the state. The town enjoys their services for being a part of this cooperative fire protection. So truly, there's an added benefit that the town is not having to fund, being blunt about it, or my salary as well. So the town doesn't pay for the fire chief, the deputy chief, or the division chief, and one of the battalion chiefs right now. And the town will pay for 1/3 of battalion chiefs. So there's truly a benefit that the town sees day in and day out as far as the level of leadership that is provided by CAL FIRE / Napa County Fire to the town. So we truly enjoy being here. The level of morale at the station is at an all-time high right now. To see the men and women that are there, just to see that the town is invested in them. They want to invest back into that with the level of service that you've always enjoyed. We're taking that to another level is the best way I can put it right now. And so if for some reason you're not seeing that or you have questions, please refer them to me. I will handle that immediately. We're getting ready to do the hiring process for the Yountville funded battalion chief between the town and the vet's home. Now that we have the contract inked with the county, we can start that process. That'll take us a few months to get that on board. I look forward to bringing that individual to your council meeting here to introduce them to you can get to know them, and you'll be seeing them more on a regular basis here in town. So, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you very much for just reviewing again what you did talk to us a couple months ago. But I think it's important for the community to hear that that we're proud of the service that you provide us. And for myself too, I feel that it's also important that your team, your firefighters, have the support within themselves too. They have the staffing levels to protect themselves when they're in an emergency situation. But my experience ever going over to the station when it's just providing me ice for a fundraising event at either throughout town is that you have a great group of firefighters there. They're very professional. And thank you for just being here for the community.
Thank you for recognizing that, Vice Mayor. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Councilmember Tripp.
I just wanted to ask you what the battalion chief that will now be associated with Yountville. So is that person work Monday through Friday? Are they at the station? I'm just not familiar.
They
with
work a 72-hour work week, so they'll work a 3-day shift. 324s is the shift that the rank and file of our department has. So you see behind me, Chief West, who just gave you your report. This individual, man or woman, whoever gets the position, will be his partner. Okay. And so you'll see 6 days a week at least of that. And then we have a relief person that'll come through. So the idea being that the Yountville battalion chief, that'll be, again, regionally between the vet's home and the county and the town, will be available for those services. But they always have their phone on. There's always available. They're also going to be responsible for some of the volunteer companies that surround the town as well. So there is a scope of work, if you will, that'll be assigned. But the goal here is to interact with the town manager, more often to be my voice on a day-to-day basis, and before things need to get elevated to my level if they need to. And so they will be on a set schedule that you will have. And then But again, there will be another battalion chief that the state is funding, that cooperative fire protection. So you'll have 6 days a week, probably 7, truth be told, the way that overtime falls and the way that the shifts align. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And now we have Chief Malat is coming up to tell us about the Napa County Sheriff, what you guys have been up to last quarter.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My money's on the fire department to win this quarter. I dialed it back to basics. We can go. So this is the quarterly report for the Sheriff's Office in the town of Yountville for the second quarter. Same as the fire department, April, May, and June. We can go on to the first slide, please. The few of these I've done, I've realized our numbers tend to be pretty consistent so far, and even looking back on some of the old ones. So no surprises. Again, we're going to be consistent. This quarter, our calls for service are similar to last quarter, a little bit higher, and then about 200 lower than the same quarter last year. As we talked about last quarterly report, that's it's related to the 200 fewer patrol checks that we've logged, and it's just a difference in how we're logging patrol checks. We don't log a patrol check every time we drive into Bella Vista at this point. So, our reports up a little bit this quarter. From last quarter, pretty consistent with same quarter last year. I don't think there's an explanation for that. It's probably a seasonality issue, but our arrests this quarter are up, and I would like to be able to explain that, but I think it's just an anomaly because we don't have a large sample size. It was no one thing unusual. It was some warrant arrests. We did have a couple of DUIs this quarter. A couple of public intoxication, both alcohol and drugs. One of those turned into a drug sales case. And then 3 grand theft cases, which I'll discuss later on. But during the quarter, one of those arrests was made on a bicycle. That was my first arrest I made on a bicycle. I didn't do the transport on the bicycle. I had to have a cover unit come in and do that. But if we can move on to the next slide. Our UCR stats, these are the ones we're mainly concerned about, remain low. We have one assault reported this quarter. It was I don't mean to make light of it. It was a vehicle driving. It was an assault. A vehicle driving by a couple of people in town and randomly shooting salt pellets at restaurants. So restaurants, and then one person walking. We got a vehicle description. It appears to be teenagers, no license plate. The people in that case, nobody was injured, and I'm not even sure what the object was that shot the salt out. But that was our person's crime for the quarter. Again, the 2 grand thefts, which were thefts of bicycles, e-bikes. So it's 2 different incidents from one hotel in town that has e-bicycles for their guests to use. One time, 2 of those bicycles were taken by 2 people. Another completely different person on a different occasion took one of those bikes. All 3 of the bikes were located. And all 3 of those subjects were arrested. The petty theft is a theft of a bar table that was outdoors. That also was recovered. And there was no arrest in that case, but the table was recovered. If we can go on to next slide. I know everyone likes pictures of firefighters. We don't. Unfortunately, I don't have. During the 3 months, I did not take any photographs of any deputies from the department. So the one photo I was able to find was firemen from a body cam on one of the collisions that we had. I know everybody likes the firefighter photos, so they look better than we do. So there were 2 non-injury collisions during the quarter, no injury collisions. Both of them were hit-and-run collisions. One was a vehicle versus a street sign. We did not locate that person. The other was, this is the victim vehicle in that collision, a vehicle versus another vehicle. No injuries. The other party was located. There was an arrest for that case. As I said, the subject was DUI in that case. Traffic citations for the quarter are up slightly from last quarter, up about double from same quarter last year. Misdemeanor citations, which are generally traffic misdemeanors in town, that's what most of our misdemeanors are, about the same as prior quarter. Parking citations up a little bit. Last quarter we had the prior quarter we had the issue with the citations, so we should be on the increase there. Vehicle checks remains consistent. Traffic stops, just a few more this quarter than last quarter, but again, we're up from same quarter last year. If we can move on to next, training and engagement. I did get one photograph. It's not from our department. Sergio Mogado, who is the graveyard deputy for town now, went through Roanoke Park's basic bicycle school. So I stole the photo from their training video. Training engagement for the quarter, we were involved in a couple of local trainings and events. The Genesis Protect tabletop exercise, which took place at Yountville Community Hall, involved fire, involved several law enforcement agencies, and then some civilian agencies. I will tell you, I learned just enough to confuse everyone if I try to explain it here, so I will not. I think the important thing is that it's an emergency communication system, but it does not take the place of Nixle, what we're currently using. That remains the main emergency communication system. Deputy Oster completed a 3-day standardized field sobriety testing course. It's a basic DUI course. About 2 weeks later is when we had the DUI collision, so he got to put that right to work. As I said, Deputy Mogado completed his basic bicycle training, so he should be out in the evenings, probably in the dark, riding the bicycle. He completed a basic traffic collision investigation. He's been assigned to countywide MATE team, which is Major Accident Investigation team. So he'll be doing some more of those trainings. In September, beginning of October, he's scheduled for the intermediate traffic collision course. All the deputies in the department took part in our perishable skills trainings, which is once a year. Post requires us to go through trainings for certain skills that are perishable. So we all went through arrest and control. That's a half-day course. Emergency vehicle operation, so a little bit of high-speed driving. That's a half-day course. A full day of firearms training. That's in addition to, we do a monthly firearms training, but that's a once-a-year full-day training. And then first aid, also a full-day training. Deputy Oster assisted traffic on Rock the Ride event, the bicycle event fundraiser. Not all of us. Three of us were out and about on bicycles and taking part in the Yountville Sip and Stroll. And then Sergio Mogado was able to get out and watch a portion of the June movie in the park. Unfortunately, he was unavailable for the July, so he missed the July movie in the park. But we'll be back to that. If I can move on to the next. My crime prevention tip, I used all my energy last quarter on my crime prevention tip, so I'm bringing it back to just very basic. Not a lot of crime in Yountville, as you can see. The one thing that kind of stood out this quarter was 3 different bike thefts, and then we've actually had one since then in April. Going back, it's kind of a common thing. It seems like that's the one thing that every couple of months we get a bicycle or 2 stolen. Almost always unsecured. And I don't know if I said, since April, we've also had one. The gentleman that we located with the bike in April, after July, after the quarter. The gentleman that we located in July has been arrested for the same thing before. He's been arrested in different jurisdictions for the same thing. He's out of custody. He is a county resident, and so he will be back, and my money would be on him at some point taking another bike. So I think we do get a little bit complacent in Yountville. It's one of the nice things about living in Yountville is it's very secure, but I drive around and sometimes I see packages piled up on doorsteps, and I think, wow, that's really not a lot of places you could do that. And so my one ask for this quarter would just be to secure your bicycles, and then anything similar that's easily accessible that's kind of a target of opportunity. If citizens could keep those locked up, I'd appreciate it. And I think that's it for this quarter.
Okay. Great. Any questions? Councilmember McKee Kent.
No questions. I just want to thank you and our evening bicyclist, Deputy Mulgado. I mean, we are so lucky in Yountville that we can, as residents as well as our visitors, stroll during these warm summer evenings. And I mean, we're like a picture postcard for tourism with the safety here, and it's because of diligence. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to extend an invitation on behalf of the entire council. We'll be holding our annual 9/11 event this year at the community center, and we'll start at 7 a.m. So always great to be able to honor all of our local heroes in town. So please stop by. I'm sure we're going to have some donuts and coffee and some fun stuff like that. So hope to see everybody there. Any other Councilmember Tripp?
I just wanted to thank the sergeant. I'm not sure you get enough credit for the things that don't happen, and Yountville is a very safe place, but I have the good fortune to live about a block away, and I know you guys are very diligent. And I just have one question. So the police car that says dog, is there really a dog in there, a canine?
Not always, but generally, yes. The canine, that car that's marked with the canine is the canine car. So there's either a dog in it or somewhere right around.
Okay, that was my only curiosity.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, thank you for the really good service.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. I'll give everyone a little break in case you're not interested in our next presentation and would
Mass exodus.
like to get back to what you need to do. So.
Thank you.
Bye, Josh.
All right, next on our agenda is public hearings, and we have none tonight. So we have 3 administrative regular items. Our first one is consideration and adoption of a resolution regarding the town council handbook. So can we get a staff report, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Brad Ralston, Town Manager. No formal report. However, I will mention that there was a special meeting held on June 19th where we discussed and went through the handbook. There was several comments that have been reflected in the updated handbook. In essence, the handbook, specifically chapters 2 and 3 of it, will replace what was previously referred to as the protocols, which address policies, procedures, and practices related to meetings and council roles and responsibilities. Yes, this is before you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. So before we get started, as part of our new handbook, we have a slightly different policy that we're going to follow up here. So what we're going to do is after the staff report, then I will see if there's any questions from the council. We go around everyone gets 2 opportunities to do that. And then I'll call for public comment on this item. And then we will we'll come back and make a resolution and have a discussion about that and then take a vote. So that's our new procedure. I'll mention it a few times. So we started with the staff report. So any questions from the council? As our town manager said,
We had a meeting.
we've talked a lot about this, from early development to a final product that we have before us tonight. So I see no questions from the council. So any public comment? And I see no public comment on this item either. So this is going to be really great, I think, and I'll keep repeating, as I said, not every time, but until everyone kind of gets used to the process. So I will invite a motion and a second that we can debate.
Mayor, I move consideration and adoption of resolution number 23-4225, adopting the town council handbook.
We have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And before we vote, any discussion on the motion on the floor? Councilmember Tripp?
I just wanted to commend and thank the town attorney on working on this, but also the leadership of town manager Ralston and helping us focus on the several issues that really were the focus or that we needed to discuss, and that was extremely helpful. And although this is probably not the most controversial, I see this as a huge improvement over where we were with the town protocols and some of the issues that I felt needed to be clarified. And we've now increased the time for public comment, removed the language that was somewhat restrictive about public comment. The other major issue that I feel is helpful is we clarified that 2 council members can now bring something forward for the agenda, although I suspect that the town manager will be amenable to hearing us all out individually on what we'd like to see on the agenda. But I see that as a major improvement. Previously, it took a majority of the council, which was sometimes from the outside seemed somewhat cumbersome. So I think overall this is a good clarification and improvement of some of the issues that some of us saw with the previous protocols. And we have renamed it a handbook, and I think apart from the renaming, that also has the feature that portions of it can be changed by the staff, things that are not regulatory or as big of issues. And so that makes it a more flexible document. So I think overall it's a very good product. And I was happy with the process and appreciative of the mayor for her patience as we all had a chance to give our 2 cents. It was very helpful. So I really recommend our approval of this.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for summarizing, Councilmember Tripp. We started with a protocol that the councils have had. I think we've created a handbook that is helpful for new council members, as well as focusing on the protocols that help our conversations with the community and public comment. As Councilmember Tripp said, as the mayor has indicated, we're making an effort through Rosenberg's Rules of Order to help improve our dialogue as we talk about items, so it's clear for the council and for the community. And again, thank you, Councilmember Tripp, for your summary. The only thing I would add is that I'm glad it's one of the things for a few years council has been talking about creating a rotation for the vice mayor. So while we probably still have to work through some approval of the municipal code and some language changes for approval for that, what our new document will allow is for at every first meeting in January, there will be a rotation of the vice mayor. I am the vice mayor this year. I'll relinquish that on January, and there's a protocol in place in the document to then choose the next council member and they can choose to become vice mayor or not. But I think it's an improvement for our council, for everyone to have an opportunity to do that, to take away a process that was controversial every 2 years after election. And I think I'm glad the council supported that change. So thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember McKee Kent.
I don't have anything original to add to what Hillary, our Councilmember Knight, as well as Tripp added, but I do want to say that we went into this with the guidance and leadership from Attorney Bell and new town manager Ralston, and we looked to the future long past when this council will be sitting here by having 2 of these chapters that can be amendable by staff and customizable for new councils coming in, as well as protocols of courtesy and respect for all of our commissions. I think this will have long legs, and we're really happy to move it forward.
Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to echo those comments, and I want to commend our new town manager. We went into this process a bit big. It was a big thing, and it was very contentious, and I think very well diffused by a different perspective brought by the new town manager. And I think we all relaxed into the idea that we can work together, and this is a good way to do that. And I really am happy that we're at this point where we can approve this and start working together very easily.
Okay, with that, I will call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And now we're on to administrative item B, which
Mayor,
is...
just real quick, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all for your kind comments, but also note to the public that at our next meeting, you will see a new flow to the agenda. So now that the handbook has been adopted, for those interested, I would point you to page 29 of the handbook, which will talk about how the sections, and there's explanation behind that. But you will see a new format to the agenda at your next meeting based on what was just adopted. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Item B, we're going to introduce and waive the first reading of an ordinance amending Yountville Municipal Code, Chapter 2.06, which is regarding electronic filing of campaign contributions. So can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And council members, up for your consideration is ordinance number 23519, which will amend the Yountville Municipal Code, Chapter 2.06, electronic filing of campaign disclosure statements. Our current municipal code calls out the specific threshold needed for officers, candidates, and control committees to file their campaign statements based on the threshold in 2014, and also mandates that the statements be submitted electronically. This amendment will instead reference the state's government code, section 84615, rather than specifying a numerical threshold, which is what we currently have, thus making it consistent with the state's government code, and for the town council to avoid having to update these through ordinance every cycle when it gets changed by the state. So additionally, this amendment will also allow candidates to submit the requested statements in paper format and not mandate electronic submissions when reaching the thresholds. So again, this is an update to match what the state is requiring of all the cities. And I'm happy to answer any questions with the assistance of Attorney Bell.
Right, thank you very much. Any questions from the council on this item? No questions. Boy, if you put a rule in, you have 2 rounds, it really seems to minimize the discussion. Or is this, I don't know if this is a trend or not, but 2 out of 2. So, all right, then maybe I will call for a motion and a second, which should include waiving the first reading. No, but I could take public comment. Thank you very much for that. So do we have any public comment on this item?
You're quiet.
Seeing none, now I can get a motion and a second with a reminder that you may want to waive the first reading.
I'll move adoption of ordinance number 23-519, an ordinance amending Chapter 2.06, electronic filing of campaign disclosure statements of the Yountville Municipal Code, and waive the reading.
Perfect. Thank you.
Going to get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and
If I
so we
can-
have a motion and a second. Yes.
If I can just clarify, it's an introduction of the ordinance and waiving the first reading, so we'll come back on a future agenda for the adoption, but tonight is just the introduction of first reading.
Do you accept that?
Yes, I accept that. Thank you.
And does the seconder also accept that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Attorney Bell. And so any more discussion on this item?
Mayor, just
Vice Mayor?
only thank you for, Town Attorney, thank you for updating and working with the City Clerk, Town Clerk to update this item. And for the community, I mean, the short point is that during an election season, a candidate that spends, that raises and spends less than $2,000 has a different reporting requirement than a candidate that raises and expends more than $2,000. We're just updating our ordinance to reflect that, if that's a quick, correct explanation of that. And I just want to just clarify that for the community too. And I support and I appreciate the work you've done to update the ordinance.
Yeah, I'd say that's right, and those dollar amounts are set by state law, and so this amendment is just bringing the municipal code in line with state law, and this was the clerk too that brought this forward after reviewing the code section, so.
Thank you. And as one who's gone through many campaigns and elections, just when I mastered NetFile, now I don't have to anymore. We can do it in paper. So I got to say, I appreciate that part. So
We're bringing options to the public for those interested in running.
all right, great. Thank you. Do we have one? I will call for the vote unless there's any more discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes unanimously, so thank you very much for that. And our third admin regular item, we're going to have a discussion and possible direction regarding the creation of ADA parking stall at Forester Park.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Rosalba Ramirez, the Deputy Public Works Director. And today I'm here to bring to you, as the staff report said, the information on the accessibility requirements or accessibility issues and questions at Forester Park and Three Weirs Park. However, this isn't a staff report or agenda item on direction on the actual Three Weirs ADA and Forester Park ADA project that we've been discussing. This report and this presentation is to address the questions and comments that came up at a council meeting in March when we did a presentation for that project, but it was questions regarding comparable facilities, comparable facilities, and the different ADA requirements and issues in that area. So this is purely to discuss the accessibility questions, and it could lead to some direction on the project, but the actual final direction on what to do with the project will most likely have to come back on its own agenda item in a future council meeting. So with that, in the previous March meeting, there was a direct request from council members and the public after the meeting to provide an accessibility expert to provide some input regarding this area. So we did hire on through our existing contract with our design engineer. They had a subconsultant that was able to provide an accessibility expert. So, and he's here today to provide information and answer questions. He did come in and do a field review, so he'll be kind of summarizing what he saw out when we walked around town and to those specific locations. So with that, I would like to introduce our accessibility expert. He will give you info on who he is, a little bit of his background, and then summarize what he saw when he came out.
All right, thank you. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Ernest Withrich. I am a certified access specialist, and I'm also an accessibility program manager for a firm named PM Design Group, located in Santa Rosa, so just over the hill. A CASP, a certified access specialist, just to give you some background. It's a certification that's developed by the Division of the State Architect, It essentially sets up a platform to establish a program to identify folks who meet certain requirements and pass an exam that show their specialized knowledge in disabled access in the built environment, both in the ADA and also in California Building Code. So the design team reached out to me a few weeks ago. There was a discussion of 2 parks that they were working on and providing disabled access through parking, accessible parking spaces, and some questions came up regarding whether or not accessible parking would be required at these 2 parks. So we weren't necessarily looking at the technical requirements of how to provide accessible parking. It's if we need to provide accessible parking at these 2 parks. We had a initial kind of kickoff meeting with Public Works, and I think the consensus was the best way to approach this is to actually look at what's going on in the field, see what some of the concerns are, and see if we can make some kind of determination of, well, not necessarily a determination, but at least narrow down what really is required out here. So we, last Monday, we, the 4 of us, landscape architect, civil engineer, Public Works, and myself, completed a walk looking, starting at this building, going around through the trail system. We visited 3 Weirs Park, took a look at the Washington Park neighborhood, continued towards Forester Park, and then continued on the trail system, looking at some of the other parks in the area to see how those were set up, what kind of amenities were offered there, see if there's anything comparable or anything stuck out. We visited Vineyard Park, Toyon Park, I believe was the other one. We were able to catch a little glimpse of that. And we ended at Veterans Park. That sound about right? I'm doing this off memory. So we then came back down Washington, visited Vandeleur Park, and ended. It was about a 2.5, 2 3/4 mile walk in the sun. It was great. We were able to really take a good look at what's going on out here. We noted some of the unique features in Washington Park with the raised asphalt, not sidewalks, but raised asphalt parking areas. And also we're able to get a good idea of how the trail system is set up that connects a lot of these parks together. I was provided with several documents to help in the review and try to digest what's going on. I was provided with the town of Yountville's transition plan. I was provided with the general plan circulation element document, which provided further information about some of the walkways and also some of the accessibility concerns and comments, which also showed up regarding Washington Park neighborhood. And I also visited the town website. What I'm looking for on a town website, and really the thing that kind of brings everything together is when we're looking at accessibility and providing disabled access in the built environment at public parks or a building, a lot of the times we really get into the weeds of how high something is, how tall something is, or what the slope of something is to make sure maybe, someone in a mobility device can easily access it. We see this ramp over here. We would inspect every little thing. When we're looking at what we call a Title II entity, so the ADA has several different titles. Title II is state and local governments, and Title III is public accommodation. So when we're looking at Title II, we're looking for something that we refer to as program access, which means that we're not necessarily looking for every little nook and cranny deficiency that we might be able to find. We'll find a ton, of course. But we want to make sure that when we review a program in its entirety for a town, that program is accessible. And what might a program be? There's a number of programs that, if I go to the website, it identifies some day camps. It identifies there was an Easter egg hunt. That might be an event that is unique that you would want to provide disabled access to. those are kind of the considerations we look for, and that we're trying to kind of wrap our heads around of, is disabled access required at these parks? And it's related to, are these parks part of some kind of program that the town offers? So that was our mindset. Those were the resources we were using to kind of review everything, and also in conversation with council and Public Works to try to figure out what needs to happen here. So we did a fair amount of due diligence. We tried to review as much as we could. We did not inspect every park. I believe there's 10 parks that are listed within the town. We did not review every program. Typically, if we were looking at a transition plan, those would be something that's offered. All I did was looked at a website just to see some examples of what's out there. We did not make any kind of definitive decision of what the programs are and if these parks need to be accessible. What we did is we're here to provide some background, some additional information, and maybe some considerations on what might need to happen, as well as I know what some of the questions might be to help answers those as needed. So with that, I'm available for whatever you might need.
Thank you very much for that presentation and all the work by staff. Greatly appreciated. So questions from council. Councilmember Tripp.
Thank you. That was very helpful, and especially the explanation of what the certified specialist does. So did you reach a conclusion on the parking in particular? Because that was kind of the crux of the issue.
Absolutely. So a firm decision, no. I would not say that we were there to make a final decision. I could provide what we found to maybe help guide things along and maybe some considerations. As currently written in the transition plan, let me describe it this way. There's two sections of the transition plan. There's the front end, which was the self-evaluation and transition plan, which was kind of the summary. And then there was the appendices, which provided really the technical inspection that was completed by the original accessibility consultants. And in that back end section, there were 10 parks inspected, and each one had a list of barriers found. And barriers are those things, again, that we consider like cross slope issues or change in levels or whatever it might be that might prevent someone from being able to access that park. That section was then summarized in the transition plan. And those 10 items, or those 10 parks, each had a priority list. And these two parks showed up as part of the year 1 to 4 priority, I believe. So it was one of the higher ones. What was interesting about it is that these two uniquely had a requirement to provide street side parking. There was another park, Toyon Park, that is a very similar setup that does not require street side parking. It appears that because there's a public sidewalk that's associated with Toyon Park, that maybe there isn't going to be that, there's a level of accessibility provided there. When we look at Three Weir and Forester, we don't see the same kind of setup. What we see is those raised asphalt, and that it's very unique. It's not something that I could look up in a manual and say, what do we do at raised asphalt parking? This is a unique condition. If we look back at some of the history, it appears that there was, I don't know if it was a decision, but it was recommendations that were provided in conjunction with, I believe, council, Public Works, and several accessibility consultants, that there was not going to be public sidewalks installed at these two parks. Instead, there was going to be street side parking. So we would have to look back at the history of how that conclusion came to be. So as currently written, the transition plan states that there is not public sidewalks here, but there are going to be accessible parking spaces installed. I don't want to say instead of it, but it says that there will be parking spaces installed.
Maybe you could tell me if this sounds right. So I think what you're saying is it would not do an injustice to the standards that apply if we were to revisit the transition plan and come to a different decision about whether parking was required. Is that a fair statement?
A fair statement would be the transition plan, and I know you want the black and white answers so bad, and I'm going to try to get as close to that as I can. The transition plan is intended to be a living, breathing document because your programs are going to fluctuate. They're going to change. You're going to build new things. Things are going to go into, I don't want to say disrepair, but things get worn, right? So I don't believe it would be uncommon that someone would visit their transition plan. I believe that there's even recommendations to revisit it and update as needed, maybe every 5 years.
Well, and that makes sense because over time you come to see who's using the parks, how it fits with the trail system, as you mentioned, and the like. So that makes sense to me.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bell, do you want to say something? Yeah. I have a question, though, and I think it's going
I'll
to...
finish, and I will add when you're all ready for it.
All right, so, well, I'll save my question for you. Councilmember McKee Cant.
Thank you. So thank you for your report. I heard you express that these two parks were high on the list of priority within our ADA plan, and yet when you were talking under Title II and looking at program access, how many programs did you discover that these parks held? I mean, when you were referring to like our Easter egg hunt or some of our larger community events, did you find a discrepancy between the programs held at these parks and the fact that they were high on the priority list?
So, okay. So within the transition plan itself, it does defer back to, I believe it's section, so I like printing things. So section 4.0 is actually your transition plan, and it defers back to section 3.0, which is some of the discovery pieces. And it states that it describes some of the programs. I could not find a description of the programs themselves within this document. So that's why I went to the website to see what else was out there, to trying to do some homework. So I don't know what programs, quote unquote. Another thing that I would consider, though, when I look at programmatic access is maybe not something that's listed as a program, but something that provides a unique benefit, such as I believe it's Veterans Park. There's nothing that I believe that I found online that says we have a volleyball program or that we have a bocce ball program. However, those are unique features to that park that would warrant it to be required to be accessible, right? When I look at Three Weir Park, it feels like maybe a passive park just walking through it. However, Forester Park offers a playground that is not provided on any other parks that we discovered. Toyon Park did offer a playground. However, this is where we get a little bit in the weeds. 2 to 5 year old playground. Forester Park was, I believe, 2 to 12 year old. So those are going to be two different, demographics that I think may warrant a unique look. We look at accessible picnic tables were provided at, or a accessible picnic table was provided at Forester. A drinking fountain was offered at Forester. So that those are other items we might consider looking at besides just like the big picture or the very defined programs that we might find like online.
That makes sense. And then because the size of the parks, they're relatively small, would they not compare to Washington Park where there is another play structure? And
you're going to have to refresh my memory on which one Washington Park is.
Community Park.
Community Park.
That's
Sorry, there's a lot of names for it.
Is that the same one as Yountville Park?
Yes.
Okay.
The third name.
Okay, great. Exactly. So that's one of those things that we would, if you were to look at programmatic access, is there a park, when we look at those playgrounds, we're not going to say each playground needs to be accessible, right? Let's think about the program. Are a system of playgrounds that are provided in the town accessible? Well, maybe where? Well, maybe it is provided at a different park. Does it provide the same age groups?
Yeah.
Maybe. Is there accessible parking, bathrooms, drinking fountain? You know, that's the kind of thing we would want to consider. Yep.
Thank you.
course.
Councilmember Tripp. Sorry, Councilmember Reeves.
So if we were to reevaluate our parks based on those criteria, some parks would not need to be accessible. Is that correct? If we have two parks at either end of the town that have mostly all the amenities plus Vineyard Park, then other parks that maybe have similar amenities would not necessarily have to be handicap accessible. Would that be a correct statement?
I'll read you exactly what the transition plan says because it addresses this. It says, each facility report contains, and this is related to that section that summarizes it, each facility report contains a complete list of architectural barriers and barrier removal actions. Not all these barriers must be removed in order to provide program access. The first priority is to remove those barriers limiting access to programs. So does that mean that every single park needs to be accessible? No, we're looking for your programs to be accessible, and those might land at specific parks. However, that's what we would look at if we were to complete a new transition plan. That legwork, just for how I reach this kind of statement, that legwork was kind of done in order to create the transition plan to begin with, and it was expected that that was part of the review, and that's what was listed as those 10 parks needing these barriers removed. So, answer the question, no, not every park may require it. As the transition plan is currently laid out and as was originally reviewed, they wanted all 10 to have something included potentially.
So my question is for our attorney. So our current ADA transition self-evaluation plan was done, as I recall, in 2014, and it is a living document, and sometimes these documents are updated versus amended. And is there a general recommendation for when you would amend a document versus, doing a complete update?
So the difference between an update and amendment, I think you might be amending it by updating it. You're going to take this document and look at what changes are necessary based on when it was adopted. It was adopted almost exactly 8 years ago, so it has been some time. Since then, there have been some changed circumstances that might prompt you to take another look at this. Your programs have changed. You have put in new and changed facilities like sidewalks. The trail system has changed in the interim. There's been additional parking spaces, including additional accessible parking spaces that have put in since this program was adopted in 2015. Those changed circumstances might lead to the standards that have just been discussed. Things like comparable facilities, things like whether or not these particular parks or other parks, frankly, are part of your overall program to provide accessibility to these parks. And so if the direction is to take a look at this, there will be another analysis that takes place. And that's why there's the reluctance to give you a definitive answer here, because we're going to take a look at this transition plan, your current programs, your current facilities, go through the analysis that the law requires, and then reach a conclusion and a recommendation that will come back to you. But based on this and our review of this now, there are changed circumstances and facilities. There are different things to look at, and we would answer those specific questions if this council gives us the direction to do it.
So in terms of direction, really what you're looking for is kind of do nothing or take that, next step in evaluating whether we need an amendment or a revised new plan, or if we just want to look at one specific area. So those are the types of questions you're asking for providing staff with direction? Right, got that clear?
Yes. So the direction we need would be, and again, it's not directly related to the project, but it's still tied into it. Wanted to, one, answer all your questions regarding the accessibility in this area, and two, do you want to pursue any changes or amendments to the transition plan which could directly impact the Three Weirs Forester Park ADA project?
But another one really is a possibility for you to then do a further analysis and then come back to council with some recommendations that, based on reviewing in more detail some of the older plan or the current plan, and then we could make a final decision then, or do you need that now?
Well, in order to move forward with the transition plan, any amendments, we do want to have a full, and as Gary said, we need to have a full analysis and assessment, whether it's amendments or changing the full plan. So that would have to be done.
Right.
The beginning, the analysis and assessment, and we'd go through the process there. If we do move forward, we'd hire a consultant and bring that back to council to approve, and then we move forward with that analysis and then bring back those findings to the council.
Okay.
If I can.
Councilmember Tripp.
I'll defer until Gary wants to make his
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to tie this into the agenda title that you have on this afternoon's agenda, in order to look at the specific stall there at Forester Park, we would need to look at that transition plan, including your overall program for these different parks. And so that's the broader direction, too, regarding the specific parking stall that is on your agenda this afternoon.
All right. Councilmember Tripp.
So that was my question, whether we would be looking at the transition plan in its entirety, because as I recall, there's a number of projects listed, or would it be focused on Three Weirs and Forester, the sort of evaluation and analysis? And then my sub-question is whether it's focused on parking, or I believe at Three Weirs there's also a question of grade of the path, which is sort of separate from the parking. But you could correct me on that. Those are two separate sort of accessibility issues, I think.
So I'll provide some input on how I viewed it, and then I'll let Gary jump in as well, where we can narrow it down to just evaluating the current transition plan in terms of amendments to maybe specific items, parking or parks, which I believe would be quicker. And so we might be able to get within a timeline of the project granting deadlines. Okay. If we decide to address the transition plan as a whole, that's definitely going to take a longer time, more money, which neither of these costs would be covered by the grant funds. And so if we do evaluate the transition plan as a whole, and regardless of whether the consultant determines, yes, you still need parking stalls, or no, you don't need parking stalls, we would be out of that granting deadline. So I viewed it as potential amendments, but it's also council direction.
Okay, well, and based on what you were just saying and some of our previous discussions, especially about the grant funding, I think the more focused evaluation makes sense, again, consistent with what our legal advice is and such.
Okay. Second, more questions from Vice Mayor.
So this is interesting in terms of just the process. I keep in mind the whole concept of, I know we have a timing on Forester and Three Weirs and funding and things like that. So in trying to just process what you were saying, and thank you for your report. It's very thorough. I'm impressed how you remember all our park names and all that. So when I hear your report, and I appreciate Councilmember McKee Cant's questions about programs. When you look at our transition strip, and it seems like it's a two-step process. Either we're having a focused review of Washington parks, or we're maybe eventually talking, or we're having a conversation about a review update of our transition plan. But when you look at our transition plan, if we're looking long term, would you see, would you recommend that we would have a stronger transition plan if there is more connection between parks and programs, and that maybe that is something we should consider in the future, in terms of it identifying priorities or uses, or would that be helpful in the longer term to maybe take a look at the transition plan in terms of what's not, maybe what we could add to it in terms of information, events, changes in the last 8 years with programming and things like that?
Yeah, so let me start off by saying the consultant that you had do your original transition plan is very reputable, and the access consultant that they had working for them. So it's a very thorough transition plan, very well done. It's consistent with how we've seen transition plans done in other cities, even ones that may have larger programs. One thing that I didn't catch, and I may have mentioned, and I believe is your question, is I didn't necessarily see which programs these parks were addressing. And I don't believe it would be uncommon to see the identification of some of these programs and where they are located. That way we're not necessarily guessing at it of saying, well, if we have what's a good example of a program?
Easter egg hunt.
Let's say we do, okay, let's just use that one. Let's say you have an Easter egg hunt. That might be more of an event than a program, but at least you'd be able to identify, we have this program, this is how it's accessible. It's located here, and we know that it's accessible because of X, Y, and Z. It kind of takes the guesswork out of it. In that sense, I believe it could be, I don't know if it's stronger, but it would be thorough and it would be easy to follow, and you would know exactly which areas you need to maintain, maybe keep a closer eye on for maintenance of accessible features.
Maybe I have a question that overlaps in terms of the planning, and maybe our town attorney can help with. It seems like it makes sense to potentially maybe look at a focused view of issues in Washington Park, but the question is, if we do that, and then there's recommendations to change something in that park, and we're working against a timeline for grant monies for those parks, would we be creating some a potential for I guess inconsistency if we make changes in one park or change the transition plan? Would it necessitate then going back and looking at the whole plan, or can we take a bite out of the transition plan and wait later to look at the larger plan?
Yes, I think you can. You can take it in stages and look at a piece of it now. I think so. I'll let the Deputy Public Works Director talk about timelines. It says I'm not aware of the timelines related to a grant, and so she'd have to speak to that piece of it. But yes, you can. The other thing I'd add to Councilmember Tripp's question, there are some standards imposed by the building code as well. And so in addition to these requirements, there's accessibility when you build things like a ramp or bathrooms and things like that. And those separately apply, and the town follows those.
Any more comments, questions? I mean, before we go to the public comment.
Well, I have a question. I'm looking at the 10 parks that are listed in this plan, and I'm curious about how those were selected, because I see Three Weirs as comparable to the one on Washington Street at the French Laundry Garden. It's a pocket kind of park that's not really a park. There is a bench there. There is a picnic table at the one on Washington Street. But I'm curious about why that didn't make it into the plan, but Three Weirs did, because Three Weirs is actually taken up by a lot of public facility under the turf. And so there's not a lot of options to make it a more than passive park or passive green space. But they have similar restrictions of parking frontage. There's not a lot of space to pull into that park any more than there is at Three Weir or Forester Park. So there's a lot of questions I have about who made it and who didn't make it into this plan and why.
Not sure any of us here can answer that question. We'd have to take a look at that if we get the direction to look at the plan.
That's a good question. Anything else?
No, wait until.
Okay. And council received one public comment. Did we receive? I know this. We had another public comment come in after our deadline, but we just established the deadline when we adopted our handbook. So, did we? In all fairness, this one time before we enact our new rules, did we get any other public comment before I go to our real public?
Yes, Mayor. We've received one electronic public comment before the new established deadline of 4 p.m. on Monday afternoon and before the council meeting. And we also received one following that deadline. The first one is from Carol Fink, and it says, I see the Forester Park handicap spot will be discussed at Tuesday's meeting. I wish to speak up and ask you to please share with the council one Youngvillian's concern. I never planned to become fragile and handicapped, but find myself there. And if the neighbors' concerns are fortunate enough to get of an age, they may indeed find themselves needing help as well. If I can park very close to where I am going, I can get out and about much more easily. They have a sweet little shady park with comfortable benches to sit and enjoy. Giving us all access to that will help make it accessible to all. Thanks for letting me sharing it, Carol Fink. And the second one we received was from Kim Cook, and it was directed to Councilmember McKee Kent and to Deputy Town Clerk Gady. I should have gotten my comment in before closing yesterday, but my mother is staying with us for a few days, and it is consuming all my free time. Since I am not able to attend the meeting, it seems unfair that the staff report does not contain any information about what the ADA consultant had to say. Isn't that the whole idea of the publication of the agenda and staff reports? That they be available for review and comment 10 days before the meeting? Sadly, in this case, they are not. Should it not have been postponed until the next meeting when the public could comment? Thank you both for your time. Kim.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment from our live audience? Yes, Billy, come on up.
My name is Billy Hewitt. I live at 9.
Can you move the microphone down so we can hear you in TV land? Thank you.
Billy Hewitt, 9 Landy Way, Washington Park. I am an original owner in Washington Park. I live 2 houses away from Forester Park, and I walk by 3 Weir Park just 6 days out of 7. And this has really presented a real conundrum for a lot of people. Because, first of all, people didn't know when 3 Weirs came up. They said, three Weirs, where's 3 Weirs? People did not know it was classified as a park. And if you look at one of the town maps, it is not on as a park. I appreciate all the effort of Rosalba and John and all the staff and from our consultant here. Appreciate the council and Gary and Brad searching the alternative, alternative places. I think, now I've lived there since the beginning, and it's my understanding that Forester Park was developed and given to the town by O'Brien, who built the complex, in lieu of having very small lots in our housing area. So there's no room for children to play at home. You can, I think maybe there are 2 lots in the whole complex, where you could throw a ball, have room to throw a ball and catch it. So I think in lieu of the small lots, the park was given to the town as a neighborhood facility. And the only thing in it is, I think there are 2 picnic benches, a water fountain, a playground for children, which you see more teenagers playing on it now than you do children. Anyway, and we have no programs there. There's no Easter egg hunt. If you had an Easter egg hunt there would be no parking for anyone, let alone accessible people, accessible handicapped, demanding. And we do have those sidewalks that have the bumps on them. What's that called? Right. So we have those through the trails.
Monsieur, just so you know, your time is running out, but Mayor,
Okay.
would you like to extend?
Okay.
Are you about ready?
And anyway, I just think maybe common sense should come in here in some way and not look at every nook and cranny as the consultant alluded to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to speak?
Hi, my name is Will Hayes. Just a brief comment. I think ADA accessibility is critical, important, and I'm glad we're addressing it. Appreciate all the effort and time that's going into addressing it. And I have personal preference about what happens at these parks, but to me, much more important than that is the fact that we have a responsive and effective local government, which I think is being demonstrated regularly here. And for that, I'm grateful, regardless of the outcome of this specific issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to the council. We're not going to have a motion and a second. We're just going to provide direction to the staff. So we will just go in order and we'll see if something is clear. If not, we will ask staff, and if staff would like some more clarity, they can do that. So who would like to go first? Councilmember Tripp.
I didn't want to disappoint you, Mayor. You snooze, you lose. I was looking over there at Pam, and she just wasn't fast enough. I do really support accessibility. Some of you know I had a very bad bicycle accident, and for about a year I was on walkers and crutches, and so it's that's a year is not as onerous as what many people need to contend with. But that year did teach me that it is hard to get around on walkers and crutches and the like. So I do really support accessibility, but I really took to heart what our consultant was saying, that it comes down to accessibility to our programs. And Yountville does have many, many programs and many, many fully accessible parks that are available for kids and all sorts of other activities. So I think given personally all the considerations of the neighborhood and the level of use and type of use, it makes sense to go back and look specifically as to what's required for these 2 parks, with every effort being made to meet, whatever timeframes we can to make use of any grant funding that's available, which is available for good use. So we want to use it if possible. So that would be my thought on the issue.
And I think that I would like to, and please let me know if this isn't kind of part of what we're talking about. Really, I think instead of just looking at 2 parks, we really need to take a look at parking and parks, because then we can really evaluate, it all collectively as a whole, together with our plans. And parking is very unique in Washington Park. As our presenter said, you can't really look that one up. So I think taking it as a whole, parking and parks, versus a whole new transition plan, at least to, scope that out, what that would cost and what the timeline would be, and bring it back. That would kind of be my recommendation. So, Councilmember Reeves.
I'm not sure we can have it all ways, because if our main thrust is to reconsider whether ADA parking is appropriate at Forester Park or Three Weir, then we're kind of changing the focus of the grant. It doesn't seem like we're then going to pursue that. It seems like this idea of re-looking at the transition plan and really evaluating what areas are parks. I think there is kind of a general feeling that Three Weirs is not really a park. It's a trailhead, it's a green space, it's an open space. It doesn't really belong on the list that also includes Yountville Park and Veterans Park and Vineyard Park. Those are major parks, and then we have these neighborhood pocket parks like Toyon Terrace Tot Lot. All of those kinds of, they belong in a different category. But I think my focus would be to really look at what type of park requires what type of accessibility, and that, I think, as Councilmember Tripp mentioned, depends on the programs. These maybe neighborhood parks don't use, or we don't use them as program locations. So in that way, then this accessibility issue is maybe taken through categorization rather than parking restrictions or whatever that might look like.
But just a comment on that, like, shall we really look at all the parks, and maybe this is what you're kind of saying too, because, and then there's Toyon Park. It's a neighborhood park, but it has a program because it has quite a bit of, playground equipment. So which one is that going to fall into? But I'm going to leave that up to staff if that's what we're saying. But so, Councilmember Tripp.
Okay. No, it's okay. I know you're going a lot of directions. What? Because I'm Mickey Kent, so this way. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Dumbfounded for a minute.
Sorry.
I shouldn't have been.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, stepping back and looking at the parks and the parking is important. It does seem like if we do that, though, then we're going to be off the radar for the grants, which is unfortunate because I know you've worked so hard, Deputy Director. But looking at the neighborhood parks, I have a hard time with the delineation of programs by it being a swing set as opposed to something that the Parks and Rec Department actually plans and events as such. But the neighborhood parks have limited parking, and I would even include Vineyard Park in that, even though we do have pickleball and tennis and workout machines. There's not much parking there. So, but there are programs there that are listed on the website, and pickleball is advertised, and with Community Park as well as with Veterans Park. Clear programs from bocce to cornhole. So you do need handicap there, but when we look at the pocket parks, and I do include Toyon Terrace in that, and I forgot about the one at French Laundry Garden. To have accessible parking there seems overkill, and I want for all of our vets in town that have mobility issues, as well as my older sister that's been in a wheelchair since college, to be able to get around. And when we first started looking at this, the goal was to make sure that all of our walking paths were continuous for accessibility. So I think we've achieved that, but to make sure that people can get around in wheelchairs and in the scooters and the mobility carts that our vets do, they are getting around fine. When we look at neighborhood parks, we're talking about other people coming from one neighborhood and going to another and needing ADA. And to me, that seems like dedicating a parking space for one compliant person when there's only parking there for about 3 anyway seems overkill to me.
And I just want to address the grants because I know it's kind of come up a lot. So my understanding, maybe John knows this, these are TDA funds from NVTA, right? So being a board member on NVTA, my opinion is it would just goes back into the grant pool. Yountville just kind of rose to the top, and these were the grants. So I don't think we're going to lose this money because that's how we distribute all the members of NVTA. All the grant money is distributed. So it depends on the project and kind of when you're in line. So I really don't think it might be lost for this specific project. But it will not necessarily be, it won't disappear. Is that, what would you like to comment on that?
I believe that's correct. However, in the redistribution of those funds, NVTA is going to look at Yountville and say, oh, we gave you money last time and you didn't use it. The other agencies within the NVTA jurisdiction who are applying for those funds may score higher in the process because we've returned our funds versus using them.
Well, I'd certainly be willing, and I know my colleague here, Vice Mayor, we would do our best to make sure that that they maybe understood it in terms of a lot of the big grant money and the size of the money that we bring to NVTA. It's a pretty small amount of money, so I can't promise anything, but I know I would certainly we would work pretty hard, right, getting those funds. So. Just wanted to clarify how all those, the TDA4 funds. So, Vice Mayor, comments?
Thank you. Question for Deputy Director Ramirez. So, I guess I generally hear from the council there's kind of support to maybe generally look at the transition plan, but getting back specifically to our project in Washington Parks, is there, and as we've talked about, so these funds have to be expended by the middle of 2024 or something like that. Are they tied to specific work that we've already given in terms of a plan of ADA parking, or could we divide the project to do some work on Three Weir and not do work on in terms of the pathway, to correct the pathway at Three Weir versus not doing any work at Forester?
Potentially. So we've even already in-house have used funds that we were going to reimburse for this project. And the deadline to completely reimburse for all the money used is September 2024, with final invoices being submitted to NVTA by August 2024 so they can send us back the money. It would be having to really check in with them to see if we're not going to actually build the improvements that we specifically called out for. Will they allow us to split up the money to just do a ramp improvement, which they most likely would not support us using that money to pay the consultant that designed the improvements that we are now not constructing. So they would most likely would have to verify would not support reimbursement for that. If we tell them, can we use a small portion to rebuild the ramp, they may support that. It just really depends on them. But the accessibility improvements were for specifically Three Weirs and Forester Park. That included the parking stall and the ramp. So that's potential that we could get money to repair the ramp.
That's where I would probably suggest that I think there's general agreement we need to somehow get, which is all of, I know, 25 feet or so, probably that ramp has to be more accessible. But the question about what happens in terms of the larger work on Forester may be a larger discussion for another day.
And I'd also like to expand on the reason we need direction on what to do with the transition plan is because these two parks are specifically called out in the transition plan. So if we do not get direction on to make any amendments to the transition plan, then we are not adhering to the requirements of it if we don't move forward with the project. So we do need direction on do we adjust the transmission plan, or do we not do anything and move forward with the project? That's kind of the end result of the transition plan.
Well, I'm pretty sure you've heard from all of us that we definitely want to move forward looking at the updating or evaluating the transition plan. We heard that from everybody. I think I've heard that at least 3 of us want to look at all the parks and all the parking, and at least one, and which I think Hillary just wanted to look at 2 parks.
Just so I could clarify, yes, I would like to try to look at those 2 parks but maintain the option or the ability to go back to the agency to see if we could use the funds for the path, which in my view is actually used quite a bit and is part of our system. So,
and so what
I don't know if that's feasible.
And I can definitely check in with them and see. So the 2, I guess, parts of this direction, and I think a lot of the requests from the different council members tie in together. So by reviewing all the parks for accessibility, that would include parking at these parks and accessibility to the programs at these parks. So I think us doing an assessment analysis with an accessibility expert or a consultant would be to review those 3 things, which would be analyze all the parks, which includes parking and program accessibility. And that would either lead to amendments to the transition plan or further recommendations to do something bigger with the transition plan. So that's the first part I hear. And then the second part would be to simultaneously still try to pursue improvements to just the ramp portion at Three Weirs Park to see if the grant would cover that cost.
And there are TDA 3 funds, not
And
4.
TDA 3.
Yeah, sorry. Do you have any, we'll go around one more time to make sure that's the consensus, but if it is, do you have any ballpark timelines or cost?
So the consultant that we had for the full design came in just under $40,000, but that was doing the design. And I believe within that contract, we still had enough to consult with just preliminary landscape architect and with our accessibility expert coming in. So that could be included in that. Giving those prices, I'm estimating somewhere around that amount to do this type of in-depth ADA accessibility analysis to our transition plan and our programs and the parking. Even though it's not the town as a whole, it still kind of impacts that. So I do see potentially that amount of money going towards it. So anywhere, and it could vary, it could come in a lot cheaper, but with prices we've been seeing for consultants, it could be anywhere around that $40,000 mark, potentially more, which we do not have grant funds for.
Okay. And ballpark, are we talking about minimum of 6 months to hire the right person and actually do the analysis?
Yes, because that's a full process. So we would, have to follow our procurement process, potentially hopefully reach out to the consultant we currently have doing this analysis, seeing if we have to reach out to others, and then bring it back to town council, so also the availability of council meetings, and then go through the whole contracting process. So just that alone could take 3 months or more. And then once we get them hired on, seeing their schedule and availability to come in and start moving forward with the project. In the contract documents, we could put a deadline to maybe get within that 6 months. So if we're able to hire them within 3 months and then tell them we need some information within 3 months, that could put us at 6 months. But I would say at a minimum 6 months, potentially more.
Yeah, I'm just really trying to get the public a sense that this isn't going to happen at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that's the proposal that our staff thinks we heard. Is that what everyone else, Councilmember McKee?
One other comment is that when it was back in March, when we were holding some meetings with the public, I had a Washington Park gentleman who's a quadriplegic for over 50 years say that he had no problem navigating the park, the bridge, the path. And one other public comment that came in during that time said, and both of these comments were more concerned about the path up above the creek. So if we are having that park examined, I would like to ask about the steep part above the creek where there is a little bit of a slope, because two people at that time said that would be my worst concern, is that somebody would gradually go off the path and into the creek.
Now, would you want that, because that could lead to either doing a specific with this review of the transition plan, do the review of the pedestrian trail itself specifically at this location, or would it be separately and we do a further review of the entire trail system by itself to move forward?
Specifically there when the expert is looking at that park, just for total safety, since 2 people mentioned the possible hazard there.
And so when we move forward, we'd have to decide on exact limitations, its limits. So from, X to X, so we know specifically only this portion was reviewed. And I
think you're talking about Fennell to Yount. Is that correct?
Fennell to Yount, and specifically before the Three Weirs Bridge, there is after the big grandfather tree that's cut, and then you do that turn. So just in that specific section.
But it's okay, we can just say Yount to Fennell.
Okay.
Because there are
Don't want to
some
make the project
areas-
too big, but
Well, as long as they're doing.
there was a concern.
And I guess before I say yes, Gary, are there any issues with only reviewing a very specific section of the trail?
So it is possible that a review of one portion of this is going to implicate other portions of that. So we would take that direction and look at this and work with the specialists and take a look at whether or not that requires some broader review. But we would take this direction as a starting point.
Okay, that would be great. We do have our lovely custom signage from Old Town with the cables through much of that section, but wherever there's a gradient to the pavement, I do think that should be checked out. Okay, thank you.
All right, so are we in, Vice Mayor?
Just to clarify, so I appreciate the recommendation from Councilmember McKee Camp, but when we're focusing and talking about Three Weir and Forrester and the funding that we're trying to preserve maybe as much as possible if we can, are you suggesting your project would be a work we would do later and not focused in Three Weir? I mean, I'm concerned about adding something that maybe we haven't included in this project funding right now. Would that affect the funding that we're working on now if we broaden the scope of the project?
Well, with specifically the direction on amending the transition plan, if we're going to do a review and analysis of the parks and parking and programs and then have it specific to just this section of trail, it might not impact the schedule as much. The determinations of there's improvements needed to the trail or improvements needed to other parks, those wouldn't be part of this grant regardless because they're not included in the scope of work for this grant. So if the amendments and the work for the transition plan is able to be completed prior to the deadline and we make a determination if it is for the project, then we can get ahead of that grant deadline and do the improvements at these 2 specific locations. So while we're doing the ADA transition evaluation, I will reach out to the grantor and see if we can still move forward with just analysis of or improvements of that ramp, if that's the direction council wants us to do. And that could potentially happen while the ADA transition plan is being evaluated.
I see Director Ferns, would you like to add something to the discussion?
Deputy Director hit it. I just wanted to clarify. The grant money is specific to these 2 locations. The grant money will be put on hold. We will find another funding source to pay for the ADA transition plan evaluation, including this new piece that we just added. And then at the end of that result, if the ADA transition plan determined within the timeframes allowed that, yes, we need to do something at Forrester and Three Weirs, the grant money would then continue to pay for that. But the funding for the ADA transition plan is separate from the grant money. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Did that answer your question?
That's fine. No, I understood that. I'm just wanting to just create as much flexibility that we move forward to maybe do some of those funds for like Three Weir, if there's something we can do to separate those TDA 3 funds and just and move forward with something, a part of it if it's possible. But I appreciate all the conversation, and I think you're hearing that we'd like to see the staff take a look at our ADA plan. So
I assume staff is clear, except we would like
a little slight clarification. I know part of the direction will be review the transition plan in terms of all the parks, the programs, and accessibility and parking to these parks and programs. But the ramp, does that also need to be included in part of the transition review, the review of the transition plan, the ramp leading up to the bridge at Three Weirs? Or do we want to pursue to see if we can do the grant funds to repair that ramp now and not do an additional evaluation of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Town manager.
Here's what I would advise is, we're going to huddle in the morning. I think we have the policy direction we need from the council, which is in essence a focused evaluation or update of our transition plan with, the parks and, all things parks, but programs and parking specifically. And then I think really as we huddle, the key question that can't be answered tonight is what the funding sources are willing to allow us to do. And I think with that interaction with MBTA, it sounds like in this case, we can sort of, clearly if we can fix the ramp with the money that's already available, then we would try to do that. So I would ask that, I think we've heard you, and I do think, I think we can follow the direction, and then we can make some determinations. And we'll get some proposals as it relates to this focus update of the transition plan. Just listening and being the new guy, the other thing I would tell you is we need to kind of nail down the terminology, because people are talking about Washington Park and Yountville Park and North Park and South, all these terms, like we need to all kind of, because I'm confused sometimes. What park are we talking about right now? But I think we got the direction we needed so that staff can huddle. I think, if there's any clarifications, clearly I can, through the staff, try to get whatever further input that's needed. But I do want to kind of try to bring it home and try to keep it into a place, because I think the staff, has looked at this many, many different ways. So I do think that we can likely take the direction we heard tonight and do our best.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, I am going to move on to item 11, staff informational reports.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Several reports I want to provide. I did want to start, now that, it was a little bit of a tricky meeting since the handbook hadn't been adopted, and we were, waiting for that action before we changed accordingly. But now that it's been adopted, I did want to at least clarify how we intend to address or how we intend to respond to public comment. And so what the handbook advises, which was mentioned earlier, is that if we receive a written public comment by 4 o'clock the prior day of the meeting, then that will be distributed to the council members, and you'll have the ability to review that. If we do receive it on the day of the meeting, it still will be included in the meeting records, but it will not be read aloud or distributed unless, we're trying to give the clerk's office the opportunity and the time to do that efficiently. We also did increase, or part of your policy is to increase the time frame to 5 minutes for people that arrive at the meetings and provide public comment. And then there is also discussion of study sessions, which would be, sort of one-item agendas that we might do before a meeting or during a special meeting, where we can have a little more free-forming sort of public discussion. But I do want to thank all of you, and I appreciate, how we're all, working to create more efficient, effective meetings by following Rosenberg's and really sort of managing that. We now have the time with the month off, so to speak, to put that into effect. So I would tell you your next meeting, you'll see some different things, and we'll, I think, continue to improve this. But I just wanted to make sure the public was aware of, kind of the policy now on public comment. So with that, I'll come back and give you a quick, at the end, an update on the tree ordinance. But I wanted to give Director Holland the first opportunity. Oh, actually, yeah, and I'll ask you, Sam, to come up and talk, or stay back, whatever you want to do, to talk about some of the community events that are going on. And
good evening. I think we've crossed over from afternoon to evening. Council and Mayor, and Samantha Holland, I'm your Parks and Recreation Director, just for the public out there. But I wanted to share this last weekend. We had a busy weekend. We had a movie in the park on Friday night at Yountville Community Park, which is on the north end of town by the cemetery. And big crowd turnout for that, lots of families. And then on Sunday, we had our fourth in the summer music series at Yountville Veterans Memorial Park at the south end of town. And we had a pretty, this was an okay turnout. We were in competition with Porch Fest, which changed their date after I had set our dates. So, but we had a nice local crowd there for our own personal Porch Fest. And it was a lovely afternoon. And we have a movie coming up next month, and concerts are every other Sunday. But mainly, I just want to remind everybody we have the Residents Bash coming up at the end of August. It's Friday, August 25th. That's the big event that we're working on right now. And it's very low cost to our residents. And Chamber associate members are actually free. The Chamber pays for their spot. So just a reminder, you do need to sign up in advance for that. So we hope people do. As you might remember, that event came to life during the 50th anniversary of the town, and it was so well loved that we've continued it on with the partnership from the Chamber. So as you all know, because you've been there, it's a very good time, and we really encourage everyone to come and enjoy. We have great food coming, and we actually have 12 of our local wineries and tasting rooms who just jumped at the chance to come out. So it was really exciting. And then
a quick preview of Yountville Days too.
Yes, so obviously that's 45th year of Yountville Days Parade is coming up. It's October 7th, Saturday. The parade starts at 11. We just are now live on the Town of Yountville website with all of our parade entry applications and information. So we really encourage community groups to get involved. And the parade, like I said, starts at 11, goes north on Washington Street, where we'll have the festival from 11:30 to 3. Live music and food, and we'll have some arts and crafts booths, kids activities. So as you all know, it's a really quintessential small town parade and day. It's a great day in town. So,
and since we have a new council, the council,
yes.
Samantha organizes.
Yes, so we organize a council float, and I'll be following up with you, of course, with all the details of that, but hopefully you have it on your calendar. We try to make it very easy and comfortable for y'all to participate together as the town council. So I look forward to seeing you that day, and we'll send out in the next few weeks just the specifics for you on where to be and when. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
And I may have missed this, but is the
Yes,
sign
ma'am.
up for the Residents Bash on the town website?
It is. It's right at the top it's on our events page under Parks and Rec. Yeah. And if you have any problem, just give our office a call and we'll help. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Samantha.
Yeah, thank you.
And Councilmember Bell, do you have an introduction for us?
Oh, sorry, we had, before that was next, but we have
Okay.
Director Ferns who wanted to give a quick update on water usage.
All right. We'd love
Sorry.
to hear about it.
Not near as much fun as parades and parties, but we just wanted to give you a quick update. We were tracking water for a long time, then the drought was lifted and we stopped talking about it. So quick summary, you'll remember our goal was 400 acre feet as we were charging through the year. The prior fiscal year, we were at 424 acre feet, so we were trying to get that number down. Collectively, as a town, we all came together like we do, and our total water consumption for fiscal 22-23 was 357 acre feet. So we're well below the 400 target that we were trying to reach. The year breakdown, 30% of that was still single-family residential. All residential was 53%, and all others was 47%. So the residential part of it is still the big key. And then the one thing that I noticed when I was preparing this data, for the year, our single-family residential weekly average was only around 1,000 or 1,100 gallons a week. However, for the month of June, it was up to 1,600, and for the month of June, we were at 41 acre feet, which is 5 more acre feet than any month in the prior fiscal year. So the warm weather and the relaxed rules, people are adopting their old habits and starting to irrigate again. And so we hoped that we ingrained water conservation into everybody, but that the numbers are starting to relax a little bit. So we'll keep the message out that water conservation remains important.
Thank you very much for that.
All right, Mayor and Council, I would like to introduce a colleague of mine, another attorney from our firm, Mackenzie Anderson. She's here in the audience. She's been working behind the scenes with your planning and building department, clerks, public works, finance. Will also now be attending ZDRB meetings starting on August 8th for the first one, and also for future meetings as well. So Mackenzie is an associate at our firm and has been working with you all and our other clients too, and she's excited about attending those meetings.
Come up and say hello so we can get you on the camera and so everybody can see you. Of course, that mic's going to be way too high for you.
Hello, all. Mackenzie Anderson. Happy to be here.
All right. Thank you very much. Looking forward to having some good attorney participation in ZDRB. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to your law firm for bringing us 2 wonderful attorneys from your firm.
Yeah, just finally, well, I did want to mention, as you consider your next applicants for ZDRB, we do intend, once that new person is seated, to kind of start a refresh, and starting with Mackenzie, but kind of working through some of the things we talked about through the handbook and just other things that are specific to the ZDRB, so that we make sure that they're serving the purpose that is intended for them in the town. So the final thing, I just wanted to give a quick update on the tree ordinance. We had our conversation at the last meeting. We have begun a process which is an RFP process, to bring on a town arborist. So that would be a certified, obviously, professional that could advise the town on all things trees. And once that person is on board, we do intend to come back with likely a 2-step process for considering the tree ordinance. First would be the clear direction we received at the last meeting. Hopefully we would then have the arborist in there so that we could talk about anything that would be more comprehensive to the ordinance, and we could get direction from council on how you would want to take that next step. So depending on the RFP process, we'll be back in the fall, I'll say that, and we'll move that forward. So that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's go through council meeting reports, and remember, we've had discussions about that too. So as we go through these, we'll just report on what's relevant to Yountville. So MBTA, I think the most relevant, and it was a big part of the last couple meetings of discussion. They're planning on putting a measure on the ballot in 2024. This will be for the Measure T funds. That's the half-cent sales tax that was passed. It's getting ready. What they're planning on extending the sunset date. But the most important thing, at least to me, is that this bill, or if it passes, will also allow us, since we all pool our funds with MVTA, it will allow us to bond against those funds. So basically, like we had quite a bit of discussion about some of our money that we get from the MVTA, and in the future, instead of waiting for our turn for our amount necessarily, some of the money we get will be able to actually, in case we need a lot more quicker, especially some of our other jurisdictions, they can actually use those incoming funds over the years, but get a bond now, and then they have a way for paying off that bond with future money, which doesn't exist now. So I think that is probably the most important thing. It's not a new tax. It's the same tax we have. It's just extending and having the provision that we can bond against it. So with that, it's the only one on my list. Anybody else have a meeting with something related to Yountville?
Yeah, I attended the Climate Action Committee meeting on the 28th, and it was mostly informational presentations with, I think, the aim in mind in educating the commissioners on what kind of things the Climate Action Plan might incorporate. We heard from the Napa Valley Climate Challenge group, and they're providing a website with resources and connections for people to join together in individual actions multiplied by community. And I think that Yountville residents would be served by that website for information and sort of where to go to look for ways to be more climate sustainable. So I think that was a really good introduction. And then we had information from Napa Valley Transportation Authority and talking about their V-Commute program, which I think businesses in Yountville should be notified about if they don't already know it. It's a kind of a rideshare program that uses an app, and you apply to be a commute buddy, and you can pick your parameters and your preferences, and somebody who talks, somebody who doesn't talk, somebody who smokes, who doesn't smoke. You can really narrow your commute buddies down, and just to have an impact on kind of the number one greenhouse gas producing thing, which is transportation. So that was a really great, they're looking for more people to become participants in that, but places like Marin and San Mateo have really large programs, and so that's the aspirational goal, is to just get more word out there about commuting with a friend.
Are there flyers we could take to businesses?
No, but the website, I think, can have it. I'll get that to you. Yeah, and I was going to talk with Whitney about that too. So there was also a report on SMUD, which is the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and that was a little bit like hearing from, gee, I wish I lived in Sacramento, even though I don't wish that, but because of their utility program and their first on the scene for so many big steps in preserving the environment and trying to be an efficient energy producer. And I think just having those possibilities in front of the committee was important as we try to create requirements or standards for a community action or a climate action plan, and also from MCE, who is our local provider, and about what they offer us as far as how they're producing their energy. They are already 90%, 95% sustainable energy, even if you're not on the Deep Green program. So I think they're really working to come up to speed, and they offer a lot of programs as well, and just going to their website you can find a lot of information about that. So I thought it was a really good meeting.
Any other committee reports?
Just one, Mayor, the Watershed Information and Conservation Council, they canceled this meeting. We'll be back in October. The Watershed and Conservation Council looks at protection of the Napa Valley watershed and a focus also on preserving groundwater. And so as one community in this valley, it's important for us to participate and follow that information. There's good information. This is located on the Napa County's website under WIC, Watershed Information and Conservation. And there's interesting information about how to help and participate in watershed protection.
Thanks. And the only council announcement I have, I made it earlier, but, really want to make sure that the public and the council knows that we'll be having our 9/11 event bright and early at the community center at 7 a.m. on 9/11. And any other important announcements for Yountville? Not any agenda item requests. I think we have we'll be going through our town manager with those, and those will come back in our new format in a different way. All right, so with that, can we get a motion to adjourn to our next meeting 2 weeks from now at 3 p.m. It's actually a special meeting to interview not a regular meeting, to interview candidates for some of our boards and commissions.
That is correct. They will be for Zoning and Design Review Board.
Right. We need a motion. I'll make the motion if no one else. Any second?
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second from McKee Cant. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstained? Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Shh.
It's really great we finished that handbook. I feel